Sometimes the best stories in golf aren't found on tour. You'll find them at the back of the range. And here's your host, Ben Adelberg.
And welcome to the Back of the Range Golf Podcast. I am your host, Ben Adelberg. This is episode 112. Hope you all are having a good week. Hope everyone is feeling okay. I was sick for the first week of 2020. Not fun. In fact, when I recorded this episode, man, the voice was not sounding good. So if you're able to pick up on it, yep, I was a little jacked up on NyQuil or might have been antifreeze. I don't really know. But the episode turned out great, and I am back to 100%. Glad I am because, yes, I am probably, as you're listening to this, on a plane down to Mexico, going to Mayakoba, going to the Latin America Amateur Championship. Cannot wait to get down there to see the golf course. Going to be following 3 Florida guys playing in the LAC. So the mojo is getting activated right away for Geronimo Esteve playing for Puerto Rico, Ernesto Marin playing for Nicaragua, and Fred Biondi from Brazil. He plays for University of Florida. So good luck to those guys. I will see you this weekend. Also going to catch up with Dottie Pepper, who will be covering the event. Always fun to see her. Met her for the first time at the Walker Cup. She is a fan of the Back of the Range and follows on Instagram. Seriously, look it up. She does. You should too. It's easy. Go to the Back of the Range podcast. That's the Instagram handle. You know we're on Facebook. You know we're on Twitter. And as I've said in every single intro to every single episode, the website, thebackoftherange.com. You can buy hats, you can buy towels, and most importantly, every single episode is available there for you to listen to and get caught up. So, as I promised, before heading down to Mayakoba, I wanted to make sure that I would get this week's episode out for your consumption and listening pleasure. Since I'll be hanging with Golf Media members this week, I thought this would be a good time to introduce you to another member of the Golf Media, if you did not know him already, Brentley Romine from Golf Channel. Brentley started his career at Golf Week, but is now covering the amateur and college side of the game for Golf Channel. I got to meet him in person at the Walker Cup last year at Royal Liverpool. In fact, this is the first time that we spoke since the Walker Cup. And, you know, despite the fact that he's just up the road in Orlando, we've actually never met in the States. So got to change that pretty soon. Maybe get around a golf in with this guy. Maybe we can set up a unique wager of some sort. So if you have some ideas, you know, that'll be mainly beneficial to me, not so much to Brentley. You know, shoot me an email, text me, let me know what you think. Maybe we can get that done. This was a fun episode, a little different format than usual because we were just kind of geeking out over college and amateur golf, talking about some NCAAs, talking about his experiences, players that he's covered. You know, the game is getting younger and younger. Brentley has seen this firsthand. You know, he's been there in the early days of Maverick McNeely and Matthew Wolff and Victor Hovland and a lot of the guys at Oklahoma State, you know, Austin Eckroat, Stanford. I mean, he has been around. He spent time at many of the NCAA championships, U.S. juniors. He's covered a major. He's been to Ryder Cups. This is definitely a guy that has seen a bit in his time covering the game. Oh, and he's also a podcaster. Yes, he has crossed over to the dark side. Brentley teams up with Steve Burkowski, former guest here at the Back of the Range. They talk about the college game on their Golf Channel podcast, College Golf Talk. It's in Apple Podcasts. It's easy to find, but I will put a link in the show notes of this episode, so make sure you go support their podcast. They really get into some in-depth stuff, some interesting nuggets of information. For example, we spoke a little bit about LPGA Q Series and what some of these top collegiate players are getting as far as endorsement deals right out of school. And I think you'll be surprised when you hear this part of the episode. So I got to get more stuff packed for this trip. So let's get this episode started. Brentley, welcome, sir, to the Back of the Range. How are you?
It's finally good to be on. This has been a bucket list item.
Well, I'm glad you're on the podcast. I mean, this is the first time we've spoken in the United States.
Yes. Walker Cup. It's good spending a week with you there. Or I guess not a week. It's a 2-day event, so a few days. And it's good to finally be talking stateside.
Yeah, well, that was the time when Hurricane Dorian hit Florida, and I actually got out of the country early because I knew it was coming, and then you were kind of hurt by that. So I was there several days before you, but looking back at the Walker Cup, let's just start there. So, is that the first Walker Cup you've covered? What's been your experience with the Walker Cup?
So it was my second Walker Cup. The first one was the United States route in 2017 at LACC. So not a long history of covering Walker Cups for me, but hey, I'm 2-0, so that's good, right?
Yeah, I mean, I'm 1-0, so I mean, I'm getting there. Yeah, I was very impressed with the event. Obviously, my first time covering an event of that scale, so I was kind of looking at it with kid in a candy store kind of thing, and just so I had a probably different look. And we're going to get into college golf, we're going to get into amateur golf. There's just so much we have to get to, but let's kind of start this episode off a little bit, make it a parallel to all the previous episodes. Get the listeners a little bit of an idea how you got into the game of golf, and then how you got into golf journalism. So explain your genesis with the game of golf.
Okay, so I didn't grow up, hitting balls on the range when I was like 8 years old.
Okay.
My parents weren't dropping me off at 7 a.m. and picking me up at 6. I didn't really even play until probably about high school. I played Tiger Woods on PlayStation.
Okay.
Growing up, but that was probably the only connection I really even had to golf until I got my internship at Golf Week when I was in college. But by then I had already decided that I wanted to do some sort of sports journalism. So that wasn't really, it's not like I kind of fell into that. But as far as golf, I worked part-time at the Orlando Sentinel for 4 years while I was in college. And one of my bosses there went over to be the managing editor of golfweek.com. So that's where the internship came from. And from there, it's just one of those things. You graduate, you get hired. I was lucky enough to get my first job at Golf Week right out of college. Spent 7.5 years there, and last December ended up at Golf Channel. So it's been, I've been very lucky. It's hard. A lot of people ask me for advice, a lot of young journalists and, people aspiring to do, some of what I do or, something similar.
Sure.
And sometimes I say, like, I don't really have a lot of great advice because I kind of got lucky.
Sure.
It's just one of those things you just have to, the chips have to fall, just right. And, you get lucky and you get the chance to do something that you love. And so, yeah, just very fortunate, and wouldn't trade what I do for anything.
Now, you wrote for Golf Week for, I guess, about 6 years. Can you compare maybe, your internship days, writing articles? I'm not even sure what type of articles you're writing or how you were covering the game at that point, but can you maybe compare it, or like with an anecdote of like how things have changed in golf media, whether it's including the players or social media, your access? Like, where did you start, and like, what's the piece you're working on right now?
Yeah. So when I first started, I always compare Golf Week a little bit to like the New York Yankees, and that there were so many great writers when I started, whether it was Jeff Babineau or Jim McCabe or Sean Martin, Beth Ann Nichols, DJ Pyhowski, who is with No Laying Up now. He was there when I was interning. So there were a lot of like great minds, a lot of great writers, a lot of good people. And, so I kind of got, thrown into a room where people were way better than I was. So it was good getting to learn. And probably the thing that's changed the most has been the impact of social media. Twitter was around back then, but Instagram was just getting popular. Like I don't even know if I had an Instagram account when I may have just gotten one when I started there in 2012. But now, like back then when Ron Balicki used to cover college golf back in the 80s and 90s, people would go to him to announce, like, if they're turning pro. Like when Ricky Fowler turned pro, he called Ron Balicki, and that's how the news got out. Now players announce everything on Twitter and Instagram, and we're almost kind of blogging off of what these players are saying. There's certain times where you'll have a good enough relationship with a player to where you'll learn something before, and you can kind of time it. Like when Maverick McNeely turned pro, he had written something for Stanford's website, but but he had called me and Ryan Labner. I was still at Golf Week at the time, but he had called both of us, and we were able to interview him and get something ready. So as soon as Stanford pressed the button on his announcement, we were able to do the same.
Right.
So that's probably the biggest thing that's changed. There's obviously no secret either that there's, fewer and fewer people doing this. It's kind of the sad part of the business is that back in 2012, Golf World was still around, and you had all these great riders, and now more than half of them aren't really in the business anymore. So that's kind of the sad state of it. But golf is, as a sport, I don't think it's ever been better. It's certainly amateur and college golf have never been bigger. So it's exciting to be entering another year covering the sport, and interested to see where all this goes, 5-10 years down the line.
Technology, just like you said, it's just opening the door for tons of different things. We're talking about amateur golf, college golf right now in January, and the year has not even gotten started yet. We have so many other things that are coming to before really the amateur scene gets going in late spring, early summer. Then we lead into the U.S. Amateur, then all those great things.
Well, we got 26 days till the Jones Cup, right?
Well, that's true. I will give you that. Though there's a PGA Tour exemption up for grabs with that one. So yeah, you got to look at that. How do you balance your time? Like I was actually on now. There's this social media channel called Facebook. I'm not sure if you remember it, but you're much younger than I am. But there is.
Was that before or after MySpace?
It's after MySpace. After MySpace, but MySpace was after AOL chat rooms, which I still remember.
Yeah, AOL Instant Messaging. And your away message
and CompuServe, and man, we're really going down a rabbit hole here. But so here's what I'm actually getting at. I'm looking at Facebook, and they did this little ticker of the PGA Tour winners, leading up to the Tournament of Champions. And you got Paul Casey, Graham McDowell, J.B. Holmes, they all won. Then you got Corey Connors, who Monday qualifies into the Valero. Some guy named Adam Long beats Phil in the desert. Sung Kang. The names go on and on. Then you just get to Morikawa and Wolf. But if the casual golf fan can barely keep track of some of these guys that are winning PGA Tour events, how do you balance your time to get the amateur and college stories out there when there's such a limited spot or limited place for it in the how do you do that?
Yeah, that's a good question. We at Golf Channel have, we're fortunate to have some people who cover the program, the pro game really well, whether it's the people on the TV side or the writers like Rex Hoggard and Ryan Labner, Will Gray. But so the onus is not all on me to write stories about the PGA Tour. So I'm able, most of my duties are still contributing to our coverage of that, but I am able to focus at least some of my time on paying attention to college and amateur golf. And a lot of it comes down to, this is a job, but it's something that I love and I love doing. And even when I'm not working, I'm still checking leaderboards to first stage at Q School, or checking the leaderboard for the Sunihana Amateur, or, just stuff like that. Like looking at the World Amateur Golf Ranking on Wednesday morning. So Stuff like that, it's a job, but it's not really a job. So when you ask how I balance my time, I don't really look at it like that.
You're always on.
Yeah, I'm always plugged in. I do get away. I have a fiance and friends, and I'm not sitting in front of a live scoring, hit and refresh for 24 hours a day. But so it's just one of those things. So what's the saying they say? If you'll never work a day in your life if you love what you do.
If you can teach a man to fish, you'll never work a day in your life. I think that's what
there
it
you
is.
go.
I think it's something like that.
I don't fish though. So.
Oh well, then yeah. I don't know how that thing goes, but no, I
eat fish.
Okay,
that counts, right?
This episode has really gone into a different direction, but it's okay. We're gonna be fine. All right, so let me ask you this one. I have done over 100 episodes here at the Back of the Range, and believe it or not, I think the most challenging or intimidating subject I had was Bob Toski. and you're like, okay, why are you so intimidated by like a 90-year-old man? But his knowledge of the game and his expectations of me to know what the hell I was asking him about, it was a little bit intimidating. So I wanted to come across as marginally educated. I'm just curious, have you found yourself in a situation where you're in the middle of an interview and that feeling of uneasiness or nervousness, or that thought to yourself, dear God, I hope that they think that I know what I'm talking about?
So there's definitely been some intimidating moments. Some of those were interviewing Bubba Watson. He's kind of an intimidating guy because you never know how he's going to respond.
Yeah.
But for the most part, there's probably, all right, I got two stories for you. Perfect. So my very first tournament was covering the Tavistock Collegiate in 2011. And if people followed college golf back then, they know that was the year that Jordan Spieth basically ran away with it and Texas won. And so I was an intern. Actually, that was even before my internship, but no, that would have been during my internship. But so anyways, I was an intern. I was 21 years old, and I don't know anything about college golf. And I know that some kid named Jordan Spieth's apparently pretty good. He played with Patrick Rogers in the Walker Cup, whatever that was. And they played pretty well. So this is me trying to learn on the fly, all that stuff.
Sure.
And I remember just not really knowing what to do and having to go talk to John Fields. And
head coach at the University of Texas.
Yeah, so knowing John now, it's kind of funny that I would be intimidated by him. But back then, to me, I didn't know if a college golf coach was anything different than a head football coach. I didn't know if they were intense or anything like that. So I was just like super scared. And I just remember him he couldn't have been nicer. And he really kind of made me feel at ease and, kind of asked me my name, kind of some background, and just remember him being really nice. So that was kind of my first, kind of scary moment that was made better by the kindness of somebody else. And then probably about maybe 2 or 3 years later, I got to cover my first PGA Tour event with Golf Week, and it was the AT&T National in DC at Congressional.
Right.
And so Golf Week used to do this instruction series called For Your Game. I think they still do it, but basically, you find out how to hit wedges or hit irons or hit a cut or whatever. So I had to do some pre-questioning for Patrick Reed. So I had to go and kind of ask him about all this stuff about his wedge game and how he practices. That way they could plan the photo shoot so they weren't like wasting his time, because I guess you only get, they may have gotten an hour with him. So if you're trying to figure out what you're going to shoot there, you're basically wasting your time. So I was kind of tasked with going up and asking, hey, Patrick, what are 3 to 4 drills you do to improve your wedge game, and kind of have him explain it. And then I send that off to the photographer and who's ever writing it. And I remember the first round, Patrick ended up shooting like 77 or something like that. And I remember someone I worked with texting me and saying, good luck talking to him. There's no way he's going to talk to you. And so I'm like, oh, like crap. Like, this is great. Like, I'm going to go up to him. He's going to tell me to go eat sand, and I'm going to be embarrassed. So he goes into the scoring trailer, and Justine's his caddy still at the time. And I walk up to her and I kind of explain, and I kind of had an advantage back then because I was still like 24 years old. So I was just kind of like this, like scared, like little kid, like trying to
they'll take pity
cover it.
They'll take pity
on you.
Yeah.
So it's not like I was some, intimidating, like old, like, curmudgeon guy or something. So anyway, I asked Justine.
We'll get to Peter Kessler later. Okay.
I didn't say that. Right. But so anyway, so I kind of explained to her, like, I got to ask these questions for your game that we're doing. And I remember her being super nice about it. She's like, "Oh yeah, that's fine." And Patrick came out, and he was cordial. Like, I probably talked to him for 20 minutes, and it was one of those things that now looking back on it, it's kind of crazy to tell that story now after everything that's happened. And I still tell people about that story because it was one of those things where when I thought there was no chance that Patrick Reed was going to do this, and he actually did, and he couldn't have been nicer. Now, after I left, he could have said like, "Great, that was a waste of time," but
sure.
But I mean, he did it, and that I gained a lot of respect, for him for that. And obviously, stuff that's happened recently, is kind of jades that a little bit, or kind of overshadows that. But I still always remember that moment when he took the time to do something nice.
Yeah, well, it's funny that you bring up Patrick Reed, and we will seamlessly segue into just all that stuff. I just want to, I mean, it's been talked about ad nauseum, but I guess the thing that I'm curious about is, there's a little bit of a dust up between Barstool and the quote unquote old school golf media, where Reed's caddy got into an altercation with a fan, and then it was reported back through Barstool. But then I guess Bob Herrig and Michael Collins on ESPN reported it, but they didn't give credit to Barstool. And just really, it seemed pretty, I don't know, the whole thing seemed kind of foolish to me, because I was thinking to the point, like, first of all, who cares? It's not on the golf course. It's just a caddy doing whatever. It's going to come out. He's going to release a statement anyway. And do we really need to get the inside scoop on a caddy's statement about an altercation? That was just my feeling on it. But I guess what I'm getting at is, how does social media and how does the instantaneous communication, how does that affect how you do your job now as opposed to when you started? Like, do you keep that in mind? Are you trying to get the scoop as much because it's kind of going to come out anyway?
Yeah, it's one of those things where Twitter and social media puts a shot clock on some of that too.
Yeah.
Before, back in the day, if you found out, so if something like that happened, people aren't finding out about it really until unless it's on TV.
They may never find out about it. Actually.
Yeah, well, they might not find out about it, but if it does come out, at Royal Melbourne, people back in the States aren't really going to hear about it until the next morning in the newspaper.
Right.
Now there's a shot clock on everything. It's whoever can get something out, the quickest. And so you have to keep that in mind, is that you're almost like racing other outlets to try to break news or to try to get, the story. And it kind of makes people like a little bit competitive and kind of cutthroat and like territorial. And so, that while as embarrassing as that whole dust up between new school and old school media is, it's not really surprising because, Barstool got the quote from Kessler.
Yeah.
And, there's a kind of a pride in that, and it's deserved because, they were able to make that connection and got that. And now everyone, we're expected to credit them. At the same time, and I don't really know what all or the details for anything about that, but from the outside looking in, it seems as if Barstool got the statement. Kessler obviously has a good relationship with Michael Collins. I mean, he was staying with him or hanging out with him at Hero the week before. So my theory is Kessler also sent that same statement to Michael Collins,
sure.
Where then, it's ESPN's statement as well. I mean, maybe they should have said first reported by Barstool, but anyways, not even considering that, I just thought the whole kind of back and forth was a little bit childish, and in a way, I'm kind of more on this new side. Now, I think the guys at Barstool probably shouldn't have attacked Herrig as bad as they did.
Right.
But at the same time, in the last couple of years, ever since like No Laying Up came on the scene, there's been this growing animosity between the old school people the old school way of doing things and these new guys, because they're bringing something different, something fresh. This golf journalism isn't just, like written word anymore. It's podcasts. It's, going out and playing golf and having fun and like filming yourself doing it. It's hanging out with players. Like it's, telling stories in different ways. So I think the old school, and, I kind of came from that background too, is like old school's used to their way of doing things and they kind of feel threatened a little bit by Barstool, by No Laying Up. But I think everyone has a place. And they just bring something different. If they want to, if the PGA Tour gives them credentials and they want to, fist bump Tiger Woods inside the ropes and Tiger Woods comes up and fist bumps them, like, so what? Like, is that really like that bad of a thing? I mean, they're not claiming to be journalists anyways. They're just, the most important thing is just bringing more people to the game.
Yeah. And
Barstool has a huge following, and No Laying Up has brought, hundreds and thousands of people, into the golf world who may have never picked up a club in their life or watched a tournament in their life. And now there's interest like from different demographics. And so it's just kind of frustrating when you see, people going at people who are basically all trying to accomplish the same thing.
Of course. Yeah. No, I kind of agree. I think there's a place for both. I think it's, I kind of look at, for example, like when I was at the Walker Cup, I kind of felt that like I was on a little bit towing the line on both sides. Like I'm trying to write, I'm trying to create, video reports and interviews, but then I'm also kind of hanging with the players on both sides and talking to them and just kind of, shooting the shit, telling stories. And I was on both sides and I kind of like being on both sides, to be honest with you. So I just thought about it recently, is that final day singles basically mirrored the final day singles of the President's Cup.
Yeah.
They went 8-2, and I think the U.S. President's Cup team went something similar to that. So, you've been surrounded by the best and brightest, amateurs for several years, longer than I have. But we were around the best U.S. players and the best GB&I players. How often do you actually come across a player at that level that gives you an immediate feeling of, oh yeah, he's going to be a thing on the next level, or she's going to be on the LPGA Tour pretty quickly? How often do you see that? And it's okay. And it's okay to be wrong about it. I guess I'm just asking, how many times do you kind of really pick that apart in the amateur level?
Yeah, I've definitely been wrong about it plenty of times. Probably more often than I've been right. But I would say there's at least maybe 2 to 3 players, maybe even 1 to 2, and obviously it fluctuates. Like the class of 2011 was obviously really good.
Sure.
This most recent class of guys turning pro with Wolf Morikawa and Hovland, they're obviously really good. But there's always maybe 2 to 3 kids in each graduate class who, you just kind of know that as long as they don't get hurt, as long as everything else in their life, kind of goes according to plan and gives them the opportunity to play golf and not have to worry about much else. You know that these guys are going to be good. Like being around Matt Wolff when he was playing junior events and playing Sage Valley and tournaments like that, you knew that he was going to be really good. Now, you knew Norman Zhang was going to be good. Now he hasn't done that yet. So as of now, I'm wrong on that, but there's still time.
Sure.
And then going back to when I first started covering the game, like going back to that first event that I covered, watching Jordan Spieth play, you just had a feeling that he wasn't going to be at Texas for that long. Obviously later in that year, they ended up winning the national title. He left after that next fall semester and didn't really take him long to win on the PGA Tour. So there's always, 1 to 2 players each class that you can see play a couple events and really know. And from me not really having the technical golf background of some people, it's definitely more difficult for me to kind of look at someone and say, wow, like that swing's going to last for 30 years and all this stuff. I like looking at John Rahm. Everyone was saying he's good, and yeah, he's playing well, and his scores are good, and he looks like he hits the ball pretty good. I wouldn't really know just by myself, like, wow, like he's great. Now I've gotten a lot better at that, being around the game for a decade, but at first I really had no idea. But there was always kind of this like feeling that I got just talking to guys and how mature they were that early.
Yeah.
That seems to be the best indicator of guys, because all these kids can play. There's some players that have this God-given like crazy talent, early, like, but for the most part, all these kids can play. And the ones that have kind of made an impact on me through the way they've done interviews and the way they've interacted with not only me, but like their peers, you just kind of know. Like the first time that I met Maverick McNeely was in the parking lot at not Martyrs Camp, at Golf Club of New Hampshire, the 2012 U.S. Junior, and he made it to the quarterfinals. And up to that point, no one really knew who this kid was because he didn't play national HHGA events. He wasn't highly ranked, but he just made a huge impact on me. And this is before I even knew like his background or anything like that, and just how like professional he was, how mature he was. And 8 years later, he's on the PGA Tour. Doug Gim, another kid that really impressed me at a young age, and his dad's just a real kind of loving and supportive figure in his life, and pretty funny guy too. But Doug was always someone who you could like go to, and he would always have something thoughtful to say. He always looked at stuff pretty positively, and you didn't really see him acting immature like when the cameras weren't on or around his peers. So that's kind of the thing that I look at now. Yeah, like once I know a kid's shooting 63, 64, 65 and winning a bunch of tournaments, all right, now how does he act off the golf course, or how does he act like with his playing competitors? And that kind of tells you how good someone's going to be. That's kind of my theory. Anyways.
Yeah. Well, and it's interesting you bring up Doug Gim and his father. They were in the the USAM final at Riv against Doc Redman. And I guess that kind of pivots me to the next question I have for you is, it's kind of a continuation, but you're around all these young players, juniors, and their parents. What are maybe some of the things that you've seen as far as, the state of junior golf, or maybe the culture around it, that, because a lot of the listeners of the podcast are parents, and they have kids that are playing junior golf. They're not sure which direction to take them in, whether they should, get an instructor early, should they quit playing other sports, and how do they make themselves viable to get a college scholarship? Maybe what are some of the things you see in that culture that could be better? Some of the like red flags you see, like you mentioned, Doug Gim and McNeely being very mature. Maybe what are some of the, any thoughts on where junior golf is right now, the culture of it?
You probably hear a lot of horror stories too, and and when I first started, and even now, like you hear about parents getting in fights and parents being like super controlling and all this stuff, but I haven't really witnessed any of that. There's been some parents that have kind of rubbed me the wrong way, or you've kind of seen some interactions with kids and their parents that weren't very pleasing to witness. But for the most part, the parents couldn't, the parents that I've dealt with as a whole, they've been awesome. And I guess advice to parents who have kids maybe just getting into high school and starting to really get serious about golf is kind of, and I don't have kids yet, so it's kind of hard for me at 29 years old to give advice to people who have kids. But from what I've heard and seeing and talking to the parents who have been through all that and have done it well, and their kids have have gone on to have success. Kind of the keys are just to, be supportive, but be supportive through the, the tough times. Don't get mad at your kid because you spent all this money to travel to this tournament and they go and shoot 81, 83.
Right.
Obviously if they're shooting 81, 83 for 15 tournaments in a row, maybe it's time to focus on another sport. But
there you go.
Yeah, I mean, just be supportive, and for the most part, all these top players, their parents are, and sadly, some of the ones over the years where their parents may have been too involved or not involved enough, they've kind of suffered as they've turned pro and gotten out on their own. So
well,
it's just and it always just kind of comes down to how the kid is. If he's a independent kid, maybe you just roll the balls out there and let him play. But
yeah,
if he values family and spending time with family, I mean, a good example of a kid who family means a lot to is Brad Dalkey.
Yeah, Brad Dalkey.
I mean, he has a great family in his mom and his dad. For the most part, went in and watched him play, pretty much every event. Now, when he got to college, they kind of, taper that down and, watch some local events. Obviously went to NCAAs when they won that. But, his brothers would come and his sisters would come and watch him, and they'd caddy for him. And it was just a good support system. And that was one of the families that really did it right. Now Brad hasn't gone on to have success yet as a pro, but he obviously was runner-up at the USAM at Oakland Hills in 2016 and got to play in the Masters, and has really accomplished a lot in his golf career. So, that's just, one of the families that I've come across where they've really, impressed me by the way they've gone about being golf parents.
Yeah. We're talking about Dalkey. We're talking about all these college kids, and it's so baffling to me as far as like how much younger the game is getting. Of course, the three, I guess the Mount Rushmore of young stars right now it's going to be wiped away and changed, obviously, as years go by. But, Wolf, Morikawa, and Hovland. And then, you see Akshay Bhatia turning pro without going to college. We're probably going to see a lot more of that on the women's side. Girls just going straight to playing professionally. There's that whole conversation of the LPGA Q Series that you got into with Steve Burkowski on your podcast, College Golf Talk. The game is getting so much younger. I mean, I can't even believe that it's been 5 years since Cole Hammer played in the U.S. Open at Chambers Bay. I mean,
or 8 years since Bo Hostler played in the U.S. Open at Olympic.
Yeah, there you go. So, I mean, this makes it your job of covering college golf for Golf Channel, I would imagine, a lot more exciting because, like, for example, like, what are we more likely to see in 2020? A major champion under the age of 24 or a major champion over the age of 38?
I would probably say over 38 because I'd put money on Tiger winning the Masters again. But
well, that's true. I mean, but I guess what I'm getting at is, if you just take those numbers and look at them, and it's just it gives you pause where 10, 15 years ago it doesn't.
Yeah, exactly. And what you said under the age of 24. So yeah. I guess Rahm would be out because he's 25 now.
I mean, you can go 25, you can go 26. I mean, it really doesn't matter. But I mean, yeah. You're looking at it where these just young guys are coming up there, and you're looking at college. You're going to be at the NCAAs, you're going to be at the U.S. Amateur, you're going to be covering these guys, and just to think that in a year or two after that, there they are and winning tournaments.
Yeah, it's kind of crazy, right? Because just a few years ago, I was at Sage Valley and. Playing. I think they've since kind of revamped their kind of lighted dormy course into like a par 3. But back a few years ago, it was 2 par 4s and a par 3, and they're lit up. And when the players play that event, they all stay in the cottages and they kind of venture out there and they're playing till 10:30, 11 p.m. at night. And one of the nights, just kind of getting done riding and walking out to my car and walking past some some of the players hitting shots in the par three. So I would kind of walk over there and, I'm not very good. I'm okay now, but back then I was pretty terrible. And I remember betting Matt Wolf $5 that I could hit the green. So I take a club and I just skull the crap out of this ball. And it almost gets on the green, but it was just a terrible shot. So the next night, same thing. Actually hit a pretty good shot, but I kind of wiped it and didn't get on the green. So, lost $10. And now 3 years later, the kid's won a PGA Tour event and he's, signed a $10 million endorsement deals with Nike and TaylorMade. And it's just kind of crazy to see how quickly, like you said, the game is getting younger and younger and younger. And it's not out of the realm of possibilities. I mean, I even think as far as predictions for 2020, an amateur is probably not going to win a tour event this year, but I would say in the next 3 years, we'll have an amateur win a PGA Tour event again.
Yeah, I could easily see that, especially since they're getting these sponsors exemptions to kind of like their hometown tournaments.
Yeah.
So they have the comfort, they know the court, they probably know the course better, they have the crowd support, they're getting probably the best tee times. You're gonna, a Cole Hammer at a Houston Open, you can go down the line. So going back, this kind of triggered my memory, but you mentioned Mount Rushmore of golf, and you put Wolf, Morikawa, and Hovland on it. Who's the fourth guy you're putting on it? The fourth junior guy that I'm putting up there. Wow. Well, it's kind of hard for me to pick that fourth person.
How about Neiman, Joaquin Neiman?
You know what? You're absolutely right. It's Neiman. You're absolutely right. I forgot about Joaquin Neiman.
We solved the puzzle. Now we can move on.
No, you're 100%. You're 100% right. It is Neiman. So, explain this one to me. Neiman does not go to college. You see a lot of these players leaving school early to enter a sports profession that has no guaranteed salary. Now, I do understand that they're going to get a signing bonus with a clothing deal or a club deal, but that's not for everyone. I think one of the things that was really surprising to me is that you and Burkowski were talking about Jennifer Kupcho's endorsement deal that she got from, I believe it was Callaway, for I think $35,000. I think he reported that in the episode. So that's nothing.
Yeah.
That's not enough even to get her across the country for an entire season. So if you're not one of these top studs, shouldn't you just stay in school for 4 years, get your degree, and play a sport that you're probably not going to get hurt playing?
Yeah, no, and I think that's for the most part, the guys who leave school early have either the financial means or the financial support to do so. And going back to Neiman not being in college, I mean, if you paid attention to social media, some people might lead you to believe that he went to the University of South Florida.
Of course,
but we all know he didn't. But yeah, I mean, guys like Neiman, guys like Wolf, they can afford to either not go to school or leave early. A guy like Akshay, because they have people paying them. I mean, they're signing, they're signing deals with equipment companies that are going to pay them millions of dollars. Like Norman Zhang had $6 or $7 million from Callaway, so he could leave early. If you don't have that, I think it'd be dumb to leave. And some people might argue, well, what if you have status on a tour? And for the most part, if you're good enough to have status or a place to play, you're going to have some sort of endorsement deal.
But status means less and less, I think, until you actually get full-time status. I mean, Thornberry and Curtis Thompson won the Webb Q School this year. Mm-hmm. They're the only two guys that are fully exempt. Everyone else has, 12 events, 8 events, 10 events. I think it trickles down like that. But if you get off to a slow start and people pass you by and they reshuffle, you don't have status anymore.
Well, plus, I mean, life on the Corn Ferry,
right,
and the Mackenzie tours. I mean, they're not making millions of dollars in prize money.
Yeah,
they're there's these stories that we hear all the time of these guys who finally make it to the PGA Tour and they finally, win or finish in the top 5 and get that big check. And you hear about all the credit card debt that they racked up, and all the times when they slept in their cars. And so it's not a glamorous life. And I think sometimes these kids who turn pro without the sponsorship money behind them, I don't think they really realize it.
No.
And it's so important to get your degree, because I mean, look at someone like Bobby Wyatt.
Alabama.
He was a stud. I mean, he was a stud as a junior. He was an All-American. He won 2 national titles in college, and he didn't do anything as a pro. I mean, even Corey Whitsitt, his teammate, like, he didn't do anything. And now Bobby Wyatt, but he stayed all 4 years, and Corey stayed all 4 years, and he got his degree. And Bobby's now working, in real estate or finance or something, and making a heck of a lot more money than he would be if he was on the Mackenzie Tour right now.
Well,
so
yeah, and it's funny you mentioned, I talked to Patrick Kristovich, who phenomenal mid-amateur in LA. He played with Garrett Rank in the US4 ball. He's won the Coleman. I mean, just a phenomenal player. And he was talking to me about, like, there's these juniors that are these amateurs that are playing college. They're like, we want that mid-am life, get that day job and go play these, hot shit tournaments like, Pine Valley and Seminole. That's the life to play a mini tour event in Hattiesburg. That doesn't sound fun.
Oh yeah. No. And I think when Maverick was kind of deciding what he wanted to do, whether he was going to turn pro or stay amateur, I think some people looked at that as like, he's crazy, like, to not want to go pro. Like, he's a player of the year. He won the Haskins Award. Like, he won 11 times in college, like the same as Tiger Woods. Like, why wouldn't he want to go pro? And it's like, you can do so much more, depending on what type of degree you get. If you get a really good degree, like if you get, a business degree from Cal or a business degree from Texas, like, you could do a lot with that. And like you said, you could be a mid-am, you could play in the mid-amateur. If you win that, you get to play in the Masters. Like, you can go play like Seminole and Cypress Point and like all these like really like posh like mid-am events, and you can still play the U.S. Amateur. And to me, and I'm biased, I'm sure you're biased too. Like, we love amateur golf, so it's fun to be a part of those tournaments. So, but I mean, I get it's these kids' dreams, like, forever. When the first time they pick up a club, they want to play in majors, and they want to be on the PGA Tour. They want to make millions of dollars, like Brooks Koepka and Tiger and like all these guys. But there's only a handful of guys who can do that.
Yeah.
I mean, there's only 4 majors every year, and there's only, how many PGA Tour members are there right now? Like 150 or so, depending on all the, the millions of exemptions and things like that, and categories and stuff. But that's a really good job. And do you think the people who have that job right now, like, want to lose that job?
Hell no.
Like, no. So yeah. So I mean, it's not that easy, and there's no guarantee. I mean, look at a guy like Philip Francis, who was unbeatable as a junior. I think a few years ago, Rory on a podcast that he did, it might have been like his No Laying Up podcast or something, they asked him, who was the one player in junior golf who you struggled to beat? And he's like, Philip Francis. And they're like, who?
Yeah.
And it's like, Philip Francis was the top ranked junior. He won the US Junior, and now he's not in golf, and he's working in Bitcoin, and he's doing a heck of a lot better for himself.
I would imagine so.
Than if he would be on PGA Tour Latino America right now.
Yeah.
So there's no guarantees, and going back to the 1 or 2 guys every year who are going to be sure things. Sometimes those sure things, like Jim Liu, guy won a U.S. Junior, almost won 2, was medalist at a couple U.S. Juniors. went to Stanford, was the top ranked recruit, and he's working at Bank of America now because he decided that he didn't want to chase professional golf anymore. And that was I talked to him a couple years ago, and he had just started to get back into playing some amateur events. He played a couple. I think he may have played like the South Beach and what's the other one down in South Florida during the winter. Yeah, and he played the Dixie. He didn't play very well, but it was like one of those things like golf and amateur golf will always be there if you want to come back to it. But he made such a great decision just getting his degree from Stanford, and he's doing a heck of a lot better for himself than if he would have tried to chase a dream that might never come, you know?
Yeah, well, I mean, when I talked to Brandon and Isaiah, Brandon Wood and Isaiah Salinda from Stanford, they were like, why would we pick Stanford if we weren't going to stay 4 years? You know what a Stanford degree is? And I was like, yeah, you're 100% right. So they never thought about possibly leaving early, but we've meandered around the subject. But I mean, talking about college golf, the national championships are at Grayhawk in Arizona this year. And for these college coaches to deal with these kids leaving early, do you try and get the very best junior prospects and risk having them leave after 2 seasons and just kind of double down and hope you get your victory then? Or do you maybe go after players that aren't high up on the recruiting list and then build them into something so that they peak as juniors and seniors? Or are they even thinking that way?
In a way, it's not quite as severe as college basketball, right, where we have Kentucky and Duke basically reloading their entire roster every year.
Right.
Now, I will say I think it pays off to go after kind of these maybe not one and doneers. I think in college golf it's more of like a 2 and done.
Right. Like Stanford's going to have Stanford with Phillips and Baber Frankel and Thorbornson. They're going to be incredible.
Yeah, Jake will probably definitely stay 4 years. I think Michael will as well. I think, I wouldn't maybe put a lot of money on Carl staying all 4 years, but I mean, so the 2 and done thing in college golf, it's worked a lot more than I think the 1 and done thing in college basketball has. I mean, you look at the last, maybe obviously not last year with Stanford, but before that, Oklahoma State going after Wolf, who only stayed 2 years. Hovland, they got 3 out of him, but he didn't stay all 4.
They got lucky with Hovland. I mean, how that whole recruiting thing happened. So
yeah, so and there's rarely guys that lead that early. Alabama, with Justin Thomas staying 2 years, they got a national championship and a national runner-up out of it. Texas got Jordan Spieth 1 full year in college. They get a national title out of that. But then at the same time, a team like Oklahoma, who won with 3 players who ended up playing all 4 years and making match play all 4 years, and a team like Stanford, who had 2 stud seniors on their team, and they had another guy in Maverick who's a player of the year who stayed all 4 years. So it's kind of the same in every sport. Like, it kind of works. It just depends on what players you get. But I mean, I don't think there's gonna be. Well, I mean, I kind of say that now and watch, a kid went to the USAM and someone throws $10 million at him and he leaves. But even looking at this year's class, I mean, there's not really anybody that I see that's not a senior going early. And I think Cole Hammer comes back. I think the Cooties come back. The only one who may leave is Ekro. And
Ekro's a senior.
No, he's a
Isn't he?
He's a junior, right? Yeah, so he's probably the only guy who I think, and because this year's class is, at least right now, on the surface, not as good as last year's, which it would be impossible for any class to be, because Wolf and Morikawa have won tour events and Hovland's already on tour. And I think at the same time, someone's going to throw money at one of these underclassmen. I think Augustine's obviously going to get a lot, because people are going to be so pressured into, we got to find the next Wolf, we got to find the next Morikawa, the next Hovland. And so what's going to happen is someone's going to get Augustine, and then the next person who misses out on him is going to be like, all right, so who's the next guy? Kevin Yu from Arizona State. All right. Oh wait, someone's already got him. All right. Who can we get to leave early? Like, oh, Austin Ekro. He's pretty good. So, I think there's going to be some decision making on that part. But again, I mean, I'm saying this purely as, from the outside looking in, not involved
Right.
or in the know in anything about stuff like this. But yeah, I mean, it's one of those things where as we talk about the tour getting younger and younger and younger, there's going to be this constant pressure for these freshmen and sophomores to turn pro, because again, people are looking for the next big thing. So, and that's what makes something like Cole Hammer's process and the way his parents are handling all this. And that, I mean, yeah, Cole has definitely thought about it, and he'll in the next year he'll probably inquire and make preparations and kind of test the waters or look at all his options. But at this point, people are talking about him. Oh, he's going to go pro this summer. Like at the Houston Open, he said this. He's like, I haven't even thought about that. I mean, I'm a sophomore in college, and this is my first PGA Tour event since I played the U.S. Open when I was 15.
Right.
So,
well,
it's just like we're trying to rush these kids into like all this stuff, and we just don't like stop and we're trying to find the next big thing, and we don't just stop to kind of slow down and be like, let's just enjoy.
Enjoy college golf. I mean, I'm very excited to be at the NCAAs. I'm excited to be at the U.S. Amateur, and let's enjoy these players and see what they do on these stages. And yeah, I mean, you were in the press room when after the U.S. team won at the Walker Cup, and I think it was Hammer and John Pock that were the two that were definitely young enough, or they were the ones that basically said, yeah, there's no way we're going to pass up playing a Walker Cup in the United States in a year and a half if we have the chance to. So
yeah,
those two guys would be phenomenal. All right, so NCAAs, I want to talk about this. So you've covered this. You've covered the USAM. Actually, I want to talk about the USAM first. So the USAM is at Bandon Dunes this year in 2020. And, I think maybe the golfing public might think of Bandon Dunes primarily as a bucket list, destination golf resort. But it's covered numerous USGA championships. I mean, Curtis
got a 4-ball there.
Got a 4-ball. It's actually the first time the USGA did a men's and women's event at the same location was the 2011 Pub Links. University of Idaho is going to host the Bandon Dunes Collegiate there in March, but maybe there's some players that have played there. But for the most part, everyone's going to be going into Bandon Dunes with really no experience at that course. And then the golf course is obviously much different than what most players are used to. It's not it's a links course. It's not Parkland. I'm just curious, how do you cover an event like that when the players themselves, it's probably hard to pick a favorite. How do you ramp up for something like that?
Well, I mean, first it's going to be hard to find a place to stay there, right?
Well, I'm staying at your place. You got the Golf Channel mansion on the seventh fairway, right?
I'm buying a tent in Bend and driving it down.
You're gonna rough it.
I'll stay on the third hole at Pac Dunes.
Okay, all right, perfect. I'm more of a Hampton Inn kind of guy, so I will.
It'll probably be kind of cold there, though. I'm looking at the normal July or in August. I'm looking at June, July, and August, and obviously the U.S. Amateur is playing in August. But the summer it doesn't get above 68, and the lows are in the 40s.
Right. So now we're bringing weather into it. So does that mean we look at any of these studs from like Arizona State, Florida, Texas, Oklahoma? Do we just say, okay, do they have a shot? What do you like? How do you prepare to even cover something like that?
I don't really. It's such a large field. It's hard to predict.
Of course.
And I love doing predictions, but I'm always wrong. And just look at this past year. I mean, Pinehurst, just like one of the classic courses. Like it's takes a lot of creativity to play, like Donald Ross greens. I mean, and a kid from Mississippi and a kid from Kentucky made it to the final, and you had the kid who plays at Sam Houston State made it to the semis, and there weren't a lot of big names, and the U.S. Amateur always brings out some surprises. There's
Sure.
always going to be the one or two guys who you expect. I mean, Augenstein didn't have a very good summer, but once you saw him play and in stroke play in the first couple rounds of match play, you knew that he was probably the best player or one of the best players there. And a guy like Carl Phillips, who I think has a chance to be the number one ranked amateur in the world this summer, or at some point this year. Kid from Australia, hasn't been to Australia much in the past few years, but still, I mean, that's, you think Australia, you think, we saw at the President's Cup, like Royal Melbourne, like that's just a different kind of golf than what a lot of these amateurs are used to. They're used to these, soft, kind of,
just hit wedges,
boring golf courses.
Just bomb it.
It's Wedge Fest.
Yeah, it's a wedge.
It's the U.S. Wedge Fest. So, but yeah, I mean, I think Bandon is like you said, it's not Riviera, it's not Oakland Hills. I think it's probably closer to Pinehurst than it is those two, and it's going to be cold. I mean, it's going to be pretty firm. I hope.
Could be a time where a mid-am actually makes a run at it for once in a very long time. I mean, you were talking about Pinehurst. Andy Ogletree wins the damn thing. He top 10'd at the North-South, which is a tournament at Pinehurst just a few months before the USAM. He wins the Monroe, and he plays for Georgia Tech, and still he's relatively unknown. Now, if we're not on top of that guy who clearly was in form and played well at that course, we're not going to see. I mean, there's going to be far other unknowns coming at Bandon Dunes.
Yeah, so I don't know if you've played Bandon before. I've actually never been out there.
It will be my first trip out there, first time playing out there, and I think we should come to some sort of a match between you and I, and we'll negotiate strokes and all that.
You'll have
stuff.
to give me. You'll probably have to bring a couple buckets of strokes for me.
Okay, we could do that.
But yeah, I mean, I can't really say what type of player it's going to favor, not having been out there. But I would imagine that it's not going to be all about length. So that's going to give a guy like John Pak a chance, and he obviously has a chance to win any tournament he plays because he's so dang good with his long irons and pretty much everything. That it doesn't matter that he doesn't hit it as far as some of these other guys.
I would say any of the guys in the GB&I team that were at the Walker Cup that actually play stateside that are going to play in the USAM, they would be really interesting to look at too.
Yeah, a guy like Connor Guh from England, Ben Schmidt, Ben Jones, who I think just recently played in Arizona, played at the Patriot and played pretty well.
Yeah.
So I mean, like I said, Carl Phillips, I think he has a very good chance because he, for the most part, I think knows how to play that type of golf. Looking at a Joe Pagden, Ricky Castillo, who had one of probably the better late summers of anybody. He's only going to be better. Pearson Cootie, I mean, and then you got to look at the studs like Cole Hammer and I mean, I guess we kind of named all the studs, but
Yuxin,
yes, I mean there'll be more players that kind of make themselves known throughout the summer, and whether it's at the Northeast or Sunnyhana or Western. So, and Western's had a pretty good course this year too. Cricket Stick.
Yeah, no, you're
so.
You're well, it's this summer is going to be the last summer before the next Walker Cup.
Mm-hmm.
So there's going to be a lot of.
Yeah, that's. I still don't know how I feel about that. Obviously, we can't have a September Walker Cup at Seminole, but it's gonna be a little bit strange. I think it's gonna be even more strange, as I think we both alluded to back in this past Walker Cup. Thinking about that is it's gonna be tough on the GB&I because these Americans have this spring semester of college golf to kind of gauge, all right, so who's playing well, like who deserves to be on the team. Most of these, if not all of them, I think there's like one event, like the Lytham Trophy or something, that's before the Walker Cup. all these GB&I guys, they're going to have to go off tournaments that they play in Australia and South Africa during the winter.
Yeah. No, you're
so that'll be kind of strange, but I guess it's the price you got to pay to get to play it, at Seminole, which will be pretty sweet.
Yeah. No, that will definitely be interesting. So before I let you go, we talked about the USA. I want to talk about the NCAA's at Greyhawk. So so Golf Channel first covered the men's in 2014, and then the women started in 2015. And my first recollection of watching college golf on Golf Channel was in 2015 when Stanford won, and I vividly remember. And I remember just like, who is this crazy girl yelling her face off?
Mariah Stackhouse, right?
Well, Mariah was making the putt.
But it was
Shannon O'Bear. I was like, what is going on? And that's when I first started getting into and watching college golf on TV. When did you first get drawn to it?
When I started at golfing in 2012, that would have been April or May. And so obviously I didn't get to go cover that 2012 championship at Riv, which would have been a pretty cool one to start with. I mean, with Texas playing Bama and Spieth, facing off against Justin Thomas in the final match. And I vividly remember, though college golf on television back then wasn't what it is now, I remember watching the highlights and seeing Spieth hole out on the 15th hole, and he won 3 and 2, and then Dylan Fratelli making the winning putt and giving Texas their first national title. So that was kind of my first memory. But the first one I covered was 2013, and that was at Crabapple in Georgia, and that was the year. I don't know if I'm sure everyone can remember the great season that Cal had.
Yeah.
But this is when we were talking about Cal being the greatest team ever. Yeah. And just, I'm not even talking about of like the decade of like all time, like every decade. And they ended up winning, I believe it was 12 times, because that included the stroke play portion of NCAA's. People count that, which I mean, I think, heck, I mean, it's basically a tournament.
Yeah, it is.
And so, I mean, Cal was like this juggernaut team with Michael Kim and Homa and Brandon Hagee, Michael Weaver, Joel Stalter, who is the 5th guy. And so I remember all the talk being about them, and they dominated in stroke play, and Homa won the individual title. But the thing I think I remember most, there's 2 things. One was there was this freshman from Arizona State named John Rahm, who was just crazy good. I think he shot 63 in the first round or one of the early rounds, and he also had a slow play penalty too. He was part of a group that had a slow play penalty. So I remember that for some reason. I remember that was this was the first time that I had actually seen John Rahm play, and he was just like crazy good. I talk about how I can look at John Rahm and not really know like, oh, that's a good swing or not, but like you just knew because everyone was talking about him, and you finally see it and you're like, whoa. It's kind of like going to see a movie that everyone's talking about and it like lives up to expectations.
Right.
And so that's one of the things. The second thing is Alabama obviously won that year. Justin Thomas, after the season before where he loses in the national championship, wins the Haskins Award that year, wins the Phil Mickelson Award as Freshman of the Year. He decides to come back and ends up winning a national title. And I remember Scott Strohmeyer, who was on that team, actually ended up earning the clinching point. And Justin Thomas was in, may have been like the 16th fairway or the 15th fairway or something. And he turned back and he kind of asked someone like, is it over? Because he heard some cheers and someone said, yeah, it's over. And he just like dropped his bag and just started sprinting. And that's kind of been, the kind of winning moment for all these teams is because they're so scattered about the course.
Right.
And as soon as they figure out, oh, we've won, like they're all trying to find each other. And some people are over celebrating some people, and then another guy's on a golf cart getting, transported back to the clubhouse.
Right.
And so, I mean, just year after year, I mean, we rarely get a year like Eugene in 2016 where everyone is around the green and the fans storm the green and all that. It's normally pretty scattered.
Right.
Like this year with Stanford being an early morning final because of weather, like that was kind of, a little anticlimactic because some of the Stanford guys weren't even there when they ended up winning. So,
Yeah.
but yeah, I mean, I'm kind of getting off again on another huge tangent.
No, you're
but
good,
yeah,
you're
I mean,
good.
first memory, 2013 Crab Apple, John Rahm, Thomas Peters, Illinois upsetting Cal, Alabama making it, Justin Thomas, going out on top. So, just I always tell people it's my favorite tournament of the year. It's kind of like the people who cover college golf. It's kind of like our Super Bowl. So it's
right.
I mean, covering the Masters is pretty cool. I've got to do that a couple times, but if there's one event, if you had to tell me like, hey, you can only cover one event every year, it would be NCAA's for sure.
Well, that's going to lead me into. Well, I want to ask you a few quick questions and get you out of here because you've been awesome with your time, and I feel that we could just kind of geek out on amateur and college golf for another 4 hours. So we may have to get you back here and do it again sometime.
I did a podcast a couple weeks ago.
What? You've done other podcasts than mine?
I'm sorry. I'm very sorry, but no. So I did a podcast with Jeremy Schilling a couple weeks ago, and we basically recapped the entire year that was in amateur golf, and it was like I think it ended up being like an hour and a half. It was crazy, and we didn't even talk about everything.
Oh my gosh. All right, so what is the best tournament spectator experience that the casual golf fan needs to put on their list besides, of course, the Masters?
I would say either the NCAA's or U.S. Amateur. Basically, any major amateur event without ropes. So Walker Cup, actually probably Walker Cup because the venues for the Walker Cup are crazy. Like if you're a fan of golf, like make sure that you're buying tickets to either the Walker Cup at Seminole or the Walker Cup at Cypress Point. And isn't St. Andrews getting a Walker Cup too?
It goes Seminole, St. Andrews,
Old Course, yeah.
Seminole, St. Andrews, Old Course, and then Cypress Point.
Yep. So that's the one event. I mean, I guess there are some ropes, but it's one of those intimate settings. It's not this huge major championship venue where the players are 30 yards away from you at all times.
Yeah.
And, it's awesome.
Yeah. Let's see. Golf Channel on-air talent that still has his amateur status, so you can't go with like a Reimer or a Overholzer or something like that. But Golf Channel on-air talent that has the best game and talks the best trash.
I say Ryan Lavner probably talks the best trash.
Okay.
And the best player who I've played with at Golf Channel who says their amateur status is probably Lavner. He's pretty good. He's probably like a 2 or a 3, but he just can't putt.
Okay.
But who I've heard
that's a soundbite that I'm gonna make sure I tag him on Instagram. So
we played Poppy Hills during the U.S. Amateur in 2018, and we played a match against 2 other people, and they were making him putt like 2-footers.
Oh,
but
wow.
he's
bad.
since, and I will say this, he has since learned how to putt. He's way better at every aspect of the game than I am, including the mental aspect of it. So I can't really talk trash, but yeah, he's probably the best player I played with. The best player who I've heard is really good is Andrew Bradley, who's a producer and a camera guy.
Yeah, I met Andrew.
Yeah, he was at the Walker Cup.
Yeah.
He's really good.
Wow. Okay.
I've heard he's a really good player.
Okay. On site, when you're on site at a tournament, what are the must-haves that you have to have with you in your backpack and while you're walking around? What are the must-haves for you to cover?
A laptop.
Okay.
Yeah, that's always my biggest fear is covering. For example, covering the Walker Cup in England,
Right.
8 hours away, or however many hours it is, and forgetting my laptop.
Oh yeah. Yeah. And
Like there was one time where I was in high school and I was freelancing like the state swim meet, and this is back when iPhones weren't even really out yet, and I had kind of like a smartphone, like one of those ones with the keyboards.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I thought that I could write my story on that, and I didn't need my laptop. And I ended up like in tears, and my mom ended up driving like an hour and a half to bring me my laptop. And
oh my gosh.
So kudos, Mom, and she still supports me quite a bit. But yeah, I mean, laptops an essential. I would say going old school, like reporter notebook. Definitely like one of those portable cell phone battery chargers.
Yep.
And probably sunscreen. Looking at some people who didn't take care of their skin 30, 40 years ago, like it kind of makes you want to take care of yourself.
Yeah. Yeah. You don't want to be too leathery when you're out there covering golf. Best chance to make a 2020 Ryder Cup team: Wolf, Hovland, or Morikawa?
I think probably Hovland, because he's going to play some events in Europe, and they're not to diminish the quality of fields, but I think it's a lot easier to have a top 10 and get some points over in Europe than it is over here.
Yep.
I saw something on Twitter today where one of Morikawa's 2020 goals, he has like 4, and like one of them's make the Olympics, which is going to be almost impossible considering how tough it is for an American to make the Olympic team.
Right.
And make the 2020 Ryder Cup team. And, it's going to be tough for one of those guys to do that, because, it's not like they have a head start or anything.
Right.
They're not currently on the team.
Yeah.
So I would say Hovland.
Yeah, I agree with that. Let's see. Have you ever seen Peter Quest from BYU and John Augenstein from Vanderbilt in the same place? And if not, are they the same person?
I think Peter Quest hits it a little further, right?
I've never seen Peter Quest hit the ball. I spoke to him recently, but I actually asked him, I said, you do know that you and John Augenstein look exactly alike? He's like, I've never heard that. I'm like, pull up a picture of him. And he's like, oh, shit, I see it. Yeah, you're right.
Yeah, I think Flash may probably disagree with that more than anyone. But yeah, they do look pretty similar. So yeah, I mean, I haven't, to answer your question, no, I haven't seen them in the same place.
There you go.
But it wouldn't surprise me.
There you go. Brentley, we can go for hours and hours, but we're going to cut this one at this point. And you're hosting this podcast with Burkowski on Golf Channel, the college golf talk, and I know you got a lot of episodes leading up to the national championship. I hope we can catch up before the U.S. Amateur. But for a first run, how was it? How was the back of the range?
I had high expectations coming in, and it definitely surpassed it. And excited to get back on the pod. But I think there's probably a lot better players, a lot better golfers waiting in line, and I'd be glad to kind of cede some appearances to them.
We'll get you back in soon. Very humble, but we'll get you back in soon, and I appreciate you stopping by.
Awesome, thanks.
And there you have it. Special thanks to Brentley Romine from Golf Channel for joining us this week. Don't forget, he teams up with Steve Burkowski for their podcast, College Golf Talk. It's in Apple Podcasts. It's also in the show notes of this episode. Make sure you go check that out. Follow this podcast, The Back of the Range, on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. We'll see you again next week for another episode here at The Back of the Range.